Hello everyone, and welcome to The Secret History. Tonight's story begins with a phone call that should have been impossible. If you enjoy mysterious and suspenseful stories, make sure to subscribe. Now let's begin. At exactly 10 a.m., a violent thunderstorm rolled over the small town of Ashwood, Oregon. Rain slammed against Ethan Carter's bedroom window hard enough to wake him from a deep sleep. Annoyed, he reached for the phone ringing on his nightstand. The bright screen lit up the dark room, and the moment he looked at it, every drop of sleep vanished. The caller ID showed just one word: Mom. Ethan's chest tightened. That couldn't be possible. His mother had died in a car accident 5 years ago, and her phone number had been disconnected ever since. The phone kept ringing without stopping, almost as if someone desperately needed him to answer. His hand shook as he pressed the green button. For several long seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then a calm, familiar voice whispered, "Ethan, listen carefully. Whatever happens tonight, don't open your front door." Ethan's heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. Before he could ask a single question, the voice spoke again. "He's already outside." The call ended instantly. Ethan pulled the phone away from his ear and stared at the black screen. Then, 3 slow knocks echoed through the house. Knock, knock, knock. Every light in the living room suddenly flickered. Holding his breath, Ethan quietly stepped into the hallway. His old wooden floor creaked beneath his feet. He stopped a few feet from the front door. Through the frosted glass, he could barely make out the dark outline of someone standing perfectly still on the porch. The figure didn't move. It didn't knock again. It simply stood there, waiting. Ethan reached toward the doorknob, but his mother's warning echoed in his mind. "Whatever happens, don't open your front door." Ethan stepped away from the front door, unable to ignore the warning. His heart pounded as he tried to convince himself that everything happening tonight had a logical explanation. Then his phone vibrated again. It wasn't a call this time. It was a text message from the same number. "He's not outside anymore." Ethan's blood ran cold. He slowly looked toward the front window. Another flash of lightning lit up the yard. The porch was completely empty. The mysterious figure had vanished without leaving a single footprint in the rain. Ethan took one slow step backward. Then he heard it creak, creak. Footsteps echoed from upstairs. He lived alone. No one else had a key to the house. Holding his breath, he grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen counter and pointed toward the staircase. At the top of the stairs, a dark figure quietly disappeared into the hallway. Ethan tightened his grip on the flashlight and slowly climbed the stairs. Every step creaked beneath his feet, making the silence even more terrifying. The hallway was empty, but one bedroom door was slightly open. A cold breeze drifted through the crack. Even though every window in the house had been locked before he went to bed, he pushed the door open inch by inch. The room was dark, except for a small rocking chair gently moving back and forth on its own. His flashlight beam swept across the room until it stopped on the far wall. Someone had written 4 words in large black letters. "You should have listened." Ethan's breathing became rapid. Suddenly, the rocking chair stopped moving. The house fell completely silent. Then, directly behind him, a woman's voice whispered, "Don't turn around." Ethan stood completely still. Every instinct told him to turn around, but the voice behind him sounded exactly like his mother's. He closed his eyes and forced himself not to move. A freezing breath brushed against the back of his neck, followed by complete silence. After several seconds, he slowly looked down instead of turning around. On the dusty wooden floor, he saw a pair of soaking wet footprints. They appeared one after another, as if someone invisible was walking toward him. The footprints stopped only inches away. Ethan's flashlight suddenly flickered and went out, leaving him in total darkness. Before he could react, another flash of lightning filled the room through the window. For a split second, he saw a pale woman standing across the room. But it wasn't his mother. The woman smiled. Then she whispered, "You're too late." The laughter stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Ethan stepped into the hallway, shining his flashlight from one end to the other. There was no one there. Every bedroom door stood wide open except the one at the very end of the hall. It was slowly closing by itself. Ethan swallowed hard and walked toward it. Before he could reach the handle, his phone vibrated again. A new message appeared on the screen. "He's trying to make you follow him." Ethan looked back at the hallway. The door had stopped moving. Taking a deep breath, he ignored it and turned toward the staircase instead. Just as he placed his foot on the first step, a loud crash came from downstairs. It sounded like glass shattering. Ethan rushed down the stairs. The living room window was broken. Cold wind poured inside. On the wet wooden floor, written in muddy footprints, were 4 chilling words. "I found you, Ethan." Ethan couldn't take his eyes off the muddy words on the floor. They looked fresh, as if they had appeared only seconds earlier. Rain continued to blow through the shattered window, but something felt wrong. The muddy footprints didn't lead outside. They led deeper into the house. Fighting every instinct to run, Ethan followed them through the living room and into the narrow hallway. The trail ended at a small wooden closet beneath the stairs. The closet door was slightly open. A cold draft escaped from the darkness inside. Ethan slowly pulled the door open with one trembling hand. The closet was empty, except for an old black cassette recorder sitting on the floor. A tiny red light was blinking. It was already recording. Ethan pressed the play button. Static filled the room. Then he heard his own voice say, "Don't trust the phone. She isn't your mother." Ethan's face turned pale. He had never recorded those words. Ethan dropped the cassette recorder onto the floor. His own voice had warned him not to trust the phone. But if the caller wasn't his mother, then who had saved his life? Before he could think, the recorder turned on by itself. This time another voice spoke. It was deeper, colder, and completely unfamiliar. "You're running out of time," the recorder clicked off. At that exact moment, every light in the house went dark. Only the occasional flashes of lightning lit the rooms for a split second. Ethan switched on his flashlight, but its beam was weak. He slowly turned toward the hallway. At the far end stood a tall figure dressed entirely in black. It had no visible face. It simply stood there, watching him. Ethan took one step backward. The figure took one step forward. Then the flashlight suddenly died, leaving him alone in complete darkness. Darkness swallowed the entire house. Ethan couldn't see his own hands. The only sound was his breathing, and slow footsteps moving closer through the hallway. He backed away until his shoulders hit the kitchen wall. Then everything became silent. A flash of lightning illuminated the room for less than a second. The faceless figure was gone. Ethan turned on his phone's flashlight instead. The weak beam scanned the hallway, revealing nothing. Relieved, he took a deep breath. Suddenly, his phone began ringing again. The caller ID still displayed Mom. Ethan hesitated before answering. This time the voice sounded desperate. "Ethan, listen to me. It's already inside the house. Get to the basement before it finds you." The call ended immediately. At that exact moment, the basement door slowly creaked open by itself, revealing a staircase descending into complete darkness. Ethan stared at the basement entrance, his heart pounding with every breath. The voice on the phone had never mentioned the basement before tonight. He gripped his flashlight and slowly stepped onto the first wooden stair. The air below was cold and smelled of damp earth. Every step echoed through the darkness. At the bottom, his flashlight revealed an old storage room filled with dusty shelves and forgotten boxes. Then the beam stopped on a steel door at the far end of the basement. Thick chains hung from the handle, but they had already been broken. Ethan's pulse raced. Someone or something had forced the door open from the inside. Suddenly, he noticed fresh, muddy footprints leading through the doorway. Before he could move, the basement door above slammed shut with a deafening bang. His flashlight flickered, and a deep voice echoed from the darkness. "You should have stayed upstairs." Ethan spun around and rushed toward the basement door, but it wouldn't move. He pulled with all his strength, yet it felt as if someone was holding it shut from the other side. Suddenly, his flashlight revealed strange symbols carved into the concrete walls. They stretched across the basement like a warning left decades ago. At the center of the room stood a large wooden chest covered in dust. It had one word carved into the lid: Carter, Ethan's last name. His hand shook as he slowly lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of old newspaper clippings. faded family photographs, and a leather journal. The first page was dated 27 years earlier, the year Ethan was born. He opened it and read the first sentence. "If you're reading this, the shadow has finally come for you." Before he could turn the next page, a loud growl echoed from the darkness behind him. The growl echoed through the basement, low and unnatural. Ethan slowly turned around, raising his flashlight with trembling hands. The beam cut through the darkness until it landed on two glowing eyes staring back at him. They didn't blink. They didn't move. Then, without warning, the eyes disappeared. Ethan backed away, clutching the journal against his chest. He forced himself to read the next page. It said the shadow doesn't hunt strangers. It hunts one member of the Carter family every generation. Once it enters your home, it never leaves without taking someone. Ethan's breathing became shallow. Suddenly, his phone buzzed one last time. A new message appeared. "It's standing behind you." Before he could react, an icy hand rested gently on his shoulder. The flashlight slipped from his fingers and crashed onto the concrete floor, leaving him surrounded by darkness once again. Ethan gasped and spun around, expecting to face the creature, but there was nothing behind him. The icy hand had vanished. His flashlight lay on the floor, its beam pointing toward the far corner of the basement. Slowly, he picked it up and followed the light. The beam stopped at an old mirror covered with dust and cracks. As Ethan looked into it, he saw his own reflection. But something was wrong. His reflection wasn't copying his movements. It remained perfectly still, staring back with an empty smile. Ethan stepped away from the mirror, yet the reflection didn't move. Instead, it slowly raised one hand and pointed toward the steel door at the end of the basement. Then, without making a sound, the reflection whispered 4 chilling words. "It's waiting for you there." The mirror suddenly shattered into hundreds of pieces, and every piece reflected the same smiling face. The sound of breaking glass faded into silence. Ethan forced himself to look away from the shattered mirror and toward the steel door. It was slowly swinging open on its own. Beyond it was a narrow underground tunnel that shouldn't have existed beneath his house. Cold air drifted through the darkness, carrying the faint smell of wet earth. Gathering every bit of courage he had left, Ethan stepped inside. The tunnel walls were covered with old family photographs. Every picture showed a member of the Carter family, and every face had been scratched out except Ethan's. At the end of the tunnel stood a single wooden chair beneath a hanging light bulb. Resting on the chair was an old telephone. Without warning, it began to ring. Ethan's phone was still in his pocket, but this call was coming from the telephone in front of him. He slowly reached for the receiver. Ethan slowly lifted the receiver and held it to his ear. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then his mother's voice returned one final time. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I couldn't protect you forever." The line went dead. At that exact moment, the light bulb above him burst, throwing the tunnel into complete darkness. A deep growl echoed all around him, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps moving closer. Ethan ran as fast as he could, following the tunnel until he finally saw a faint light ahead. He burst through an old wooden door and collapsed onto the wet grass outside his house just as the sun began to rise. The storm was over. Police officers later searched the basement, but they found no tunnel, no steel door, no mirror, and no telephone. Everything had disappeared. The only thing they found was Ethan's phone. Its screen displayed one final missed call from Mom, received at exactly 3 a.m. And that was the terrifying story of the phone call at 3 a.m. Do you think Ethan really escaped? Or did the shadow simply let him go? Let me know your theory in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new mystery. We upload new chilling stories every week. Until next time, keep the lights on and never answer a phone call that should be impossible. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.